I like to read in public. Like I like to go out for dinner by
I
myself and
think I
read a
read your
book.
tweet about this.
Yeah, I
Go
tweeted
ahead.
about this
Yeah.
recently because I was in BC. I was on the island, and like oddly, I haven't had this experience so much in Mexico. I do this a lot in like
Interesting.
my little town in Mexico. Like I go out and have dinner and read by myself, but so I'm sitting alone at a table reading, and nobody bothers me really. I mean, if I see friends, people come and talk to me. But anyway, I was in this pub and I was sitting at a table reading, and this guy, and it happened to me, I think, every time I went to read at this pub.
Huh.
But in this, one time this guy comes up to me and he's like, "Can I join you?" And I was like, "No." And it's like that was the first thing that popped out of my mouth. I was like, "No," and went back, and I was like, and then I looked up and I was like, "Sorry, like, is he?" And he looked really shocked. Like he was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Sorry, I'm not trying to be rude. I just genuinely am reading." Like I'm
I'm not here to
genuinely,
get
I'm
picked
not
up.
lonely. Yeah, no,
Right.
I'm not. This isn't a like prop. This isn't a rom-com. I really legitimately am just trying to read my book and have dinner. I enjoy doing this, and I I think that based on the responses that I got when I tweeted about this, I think a lot of men don't believe you. They're like, "Oh, but women do that. Women bring books out to the bar to get picked up." And I was like, "Do they? Is that I I don't know women that do that. Do they really do that, or is that something you guys told yourselves?" But either way, I mean, the point is that I just, obviously my automatic reaction now as a 44-year-old, it
Yeah.
probably would have been different if I was doing this in my 20s. I probably would have been way too insecure to go out to a bar or a restaurant and read by myself in my 20s. Now I just don't care. I'm like, I like it. Whatever. I don't care if you guys think I look like a weirdo. But, still I felt like I had to kind of explain myself. And then after I was like, why can't I just be like, no, I don't want you, this random man in a pub, to sit down at my table and join me. Clearly, I'm reading.
What was his reaction? Did he leave you alone?
Not really. Like he went away and he's like, "Oh no, you don't." When I was like, "Sorry, like I'm not trying to be rude. I just really am just trying to read my book. I just want to read. Actually, I'm doing fine on my own." It's like, "Oh no need to apologize," and sort of went into this new agey, barfy crap, and went back to his table with his friends, which was, kind of right next to my table. And I think he came back a couple of other times, and he was like, "I just wanted to say, a lot of men then when I do this, because this happened to me in a similar way,
Mhm.
also in this pub, would be like, I just think that's so cool that you're out reading a book." Like I'm a child. Good for you.
Reading is so great.
I just want to say you just have a really great energy. It was kind of like that kind of response. And my name's blah blah blah. And I was like, "Okay, nice to meet you." He's
Bye.
like, and then again later in the night, like it was the bar, the pub was sort of emptying out. The pubs on the island close early, like at 9:30, 10 p.m. And he's like, "Well, I guess it's just you and me." And I was like, "And my book."
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Anyway, just that's only to say that it's sort of it's an ongoing struggle, I think, for a lot. I think that some women are inherently just better at this and feel comfortable with it. But for me, it's even despite the fact that I'm, not a nice person, I still sort of struggle with that. And it's also
Sure.
interesting how few men in particular just really don't believe you. Like, no, I
Well,
like being by myself.
so I'm gonna maybe just push into that a little bit because I think it's a kind of an interesting conversation. I mean, what is so what's great is you have enough of that energy that you can do this and feel safe. Because if someone approaches you, you know that you can say no, which
Yeah.
means that you're not sitting in your house reading the book. You're not because you don't have to be nice. You don't have to be agreeable. You can be a little bit obnoxious. You can be a little bit fierce. You can be authoritative. You can say no, leave me the hell alone. And And that's a wonderful thing to carry with you in the world, because it you know safety doesn't come from never meeting a challenge. It comes from knowing that we can meet the challenges we face. What's interesting about the situation, if we're going to just kind of dissect it a little bit, is the one thing I would say is that I have some empathy for men who are still somehow expected to be the ones to approach women. And how do you know if it's okay to approach a woman?
Yeah.
And I don't personally know women that take books to bars to read them. So, but
I guess I am a weirdo.
no, but I mean, this thing that women do this to get picked up.
Oh, the ploy.
Right? It's like I don't that's not a thing. If that's like in the playbook, I missed that, right?
Like a fake book that you're not really trying to read, so that men will approach you, as if it's so hard to get a man to approach you in a bar in the first place.
Right. Like a book is like this sort of sexy talisman, But I would maybe give this guy, like one shot. Like maybe he genuinely thought you would appreciate, maybe he was like, maybe she's looking to talk to somebody tonight. But you were really clear, and he didn't leave you alone. And so that kind of crosses a line, But see, it's okay to kind of we don't have to expect other people to respond perfectly. Which I think is some of the trap that some modern feminism gets into, is that we really kind of want the world to I mean, I was like this when I was a young woman. I was like, I wanted the world to be the perfectly safe place for me as a young woman, and I felt really exercised and upset and depleted if I went out into the world and met with something that made me feel uncomfortable or unsafe. And it kind of took me getting my head screwed on different to be like, oh no, it's my responsibility to figure out how to take care of myself.
Yeah, exactly. I know. When I tweeted about this situation, I thought, if this had happened to me when I was younger, or if the young feminist response would have been like, men are such assholes,
right.
How dare they approach me in a bar? This is disgusting. Can't they tell that I'm reading and that I don't want to be talked to, and be really like incensed and offended. And it's that same. I remember recently there was this meme kind of going around after a young woman shared a video of her working out at a gym in, what I consider to be pretty sexualized clothes for a gym. I don't know why everybody needs to see like your butt crack at the gym, but to each their own. But, she was offended that this guy, I think, was looking at her and maybe tried to help her with a machine or weights or something like that. And I think that's, probably how I would have felt at her age at a gym if a man tried to help me with my machine, or I felt like he was hanging around or talking to me. And the guy didn't seem like he was being necessarily a creep in the video. But I think you're right. Like, it's about wanting the world to sort of conform to your comfort.
Right.
And not realizing that you are going to have to stand up for yourself, and you are going to have to say no, and you are maybe going to have to feel uncomfortable, and you are maybe going to have to offend somebody. And that's how you end up being able to operate in the world comfortably and with confidence.
Right. And there's, I mean, to go back to the fairy tales too, there's like, you had some antenna about this guy, and you knew that he was like maybe obnoxious, but you weren't getting danger vibes, right? I mean, if, women, when we're not like in touch with authority and these other qualities, you can either be super offended by everything someone does, and maybe, get overly worked up, or even miss out on maybe a perfectly nice conversation, because, and I've done that, like I can remember one time when I was a lot younger, some very pleasant guy smiled at me in a gym, and I was like, I treated him like he was a criminal. And then I was like, later I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, what, he smiled, like, what's the big deal? So anyway, we can do that, or we can be so um, accommodating and deferential, that we wind up getting chopped up into pieces, like the women in Bluebeard. So like either that you have to say, oh well, well of course you can sit down, when really the guy might be a serial killer.
Mm.
So but you had your antenna on, and you could trust that, you could suss that out. If it felt dangerous, you would have responded differently.
Right, and he was more just seemed annoying to me
Right.
than
Right.
anything else.
Right.
And yeah, most men in the world, we always sort of repeat this, but most men in the world aren't predators, but some are predators, and
Some
so
are.
women do need to operate in this way. There was that man versus bear meme that was also going around
Yeah.
recently, where I think it was sort of this guy was doing man on the street interviews and asking women if they'd rather encounter a man or a bear alone in the woods. And all these women were saying bear, and all these men on the internet were making fun of them because they were saying, no, you wouldn't rather encounter a bear alone in the woods than a man. And it's sort of, both are true, because I think that you really don't want to encounter a bear alone in the woods, and you don't have a lot of choice over whether you win that encounter or not. It depends on
Mhm.
what the bear decides. But,
Right.
and like maybe statistically, most men that you encounter alone in the woods are going to be like nice, perfectly normal men,
Right.
but some of them are not. And
Nope.
the fact that some of them couldn't be is like really, really scary.
Yep.
That is the nightmare. You're not having nightmares about encounter. Well, maybe some people are, but you're more like encountering a creepy or dangerous man alone in the woods, or having, like a creepy or dangerous man come into your house or break into your house or something like
Mhm.
that, or encounter you alone in a parking lot or an alley or something. Like, maybe it's statistically unlikely that that's going to happen, but that's a nightmare for women.
Mhm. Mhm. And I've been in some of those situations. It is very frightening.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, and so much of those kinds of situations too is about trusting our gut.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that, this is one of the things that I really got out of Women Who Run with the Wolves also, is that it's so important for women to trust their gut and to trust what their bodies and
Yep.
souls and minds are telling them.
Yes.
And what we learn instead growing up, what we learn in society, is that we shouldn't trust our feelings. That's how
Mhm.
it's framed. We shouldn't
Mhm.
trust our feelings, that we're being irrationally afraid. And, I think that women in particular have these gut instincts that are
Mhm.
so much more well developed than men's. And
Mhm.
I've experienced this, for example, when I meet a man and I immediately get a no feeling and I'm not nice to him. And
Mhm.
then people think that I'm being mean for no reason.
Mhm.
And to me, I could try to explain it. I could say, well, I told him that I didn't want him to hang around or talk to me anymore, and he didn't listen
Mhm.
and instead pushed harder. So to me, that's a boundary violation, and that's a red flag in and of itself. I could explain that. But at the same time, it's like, well, I just got a bad vibe about
Right.
this guy. And usually, not always, sometimes you're wrong, but usually I've turned out to be right. And men in particular, I feel like won't get it. Like, they'll be like, what do you mean he's a narcissist? Or what do you mean he's abusive? He seems fine. I didn't see him punch anybody in the face.
Mhm. Well, and that's what's so great about that story, The Little Maid Who Was Wise, right? Is because the youngest maid, she has a gut feeling, and she just sort of feels like this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. The sisters are kind of interested in being performatively virtuous.
Hmm.
They want to show their generosity, and they want to invite the beggar in to the house. And I think that sometimes I think women who exhort one another to be kind, or why were you mean to him? But he seems like such a nice guy. What's wrong with you? It's like, but you're like that youngest maid who's like, no, I don't want to let him in. It doesn't feel right to me.
Mhm.
And women are kind of routinely questioned about that, both by other women and by men.
Mhm. Yeah, and that happens in our relationships with men as well. And I think
Mhm.
that's another sort of eternal struggle is, at what point are you saying no or setting boundaries or saying this is unacceptable to a man that you're dating, your boyfriend, your husband, in all of these situations? I think this, like, what is too much and at what point are you compassionate? I've had experiences of being in what in retrospect were really bad toxic
Mhm.
relationships. This guy was, behaving in totally unacceptable, disrespectful ways, but I also felt bad for him because, he had childhood trauma and, he had all these issues and he talked to me about all his issues. Like he knew, he's a troubled guy and like you just have to be kind of patient and he has trust issues. So I have to be patient and work to build up trust with him. And that was reinforced by some of my girlfriends, like, oh, but like poor guy, like just,
Mhm.
just try to be compassionate. And in retrospect, being like, I shouldn't have being compassionate. But you also don't want to be so hard that you're rejecting everybody because they have struggles and flaws because we all do.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because I've definitely seen that dynamic in male-female relationships, but I've also seen it in same-sex relationships, right? Like we can fall into that role where we are constantly accommodating the other person all the time, and we slowly get kind of eaten at if we do that. And I think we're susceptible to doing. I mean, I think probably women in general are more susceptible to doing that. Although I've worked with men in relationships with women who do the same thing,
Mm,
where you constantly accommodate yourself to the other person. I mean, it's sort of like if you're a kind of person who appreciates harmony, which I think is why it's more likely that women fall into this, but it's not exclusive. um, then you're gonna be the one who says, "Oh, well, it's no big deal. Let me not, you know, he just did that thing and it really bothered me, but I'm just not gonna say anything because really it's not that big a deal, and, it's more important that we all get along and have a good time tonight." And if you do that consistently, then you wind up feeling pretty, crushed eventually, and maybe you also feel really resentful, and intimacy goes away because how can you feel intimate when you're always feeling put upon?
yeah.
So, I mean, these are just dynamics that can really play out in any relationship. And I think as women, we are perhaps especially susceptible to accommodating ourselves to other people.
Hmm.